when the world has got you down. And
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alls, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here are your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and me, Don Priest.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susie Singer-Carter, and this is Love Conquers Alls, the podcast that is all about Alzheimer's and elder care and extending into long-term care now with our documentary, No Country for Old People, which I have a very great announcement that we are launching on Amazon on August 1st. So stay tuned, and we'll be keeping you posted. If you follow us, you'll definitely hear more about it. And if you don't follow us, you should be, because it's very important, and we're very proud of this project, and it's information that everyone needs to know. And coincidentally, we have a very special episode today because not just because of our guest, but also because I am joined today with my producing partner from No Country for Old People, and my guest host today is Rick Mountcastle, who you may know already because I talk about him all the time. And or you also might know him from a project called Dope Sick, a miniseries on Hulu, where his work prosecuting Purdue Pharma was dramatized. He's here to help me lead the conversation that's very close to both of our hearts. Today, our guest is someone whose life's work aligns so powerfully with the mission behind our film. Richard Routman is a retired attorney who spent 14 years with the Department of Health and Human Services, where he represented the government in cases against nursing homes accused of providing substandard care. Since retiring, he's continued to advocate for older adults, first as a trained volunteer ombudsman and later as a member of the Loudoun County Commission on Aging in Virginia. Richard brings both legal insight and lived compassion to this conversation. And when he's not speaking up for better elder care, he's enjoying time with his wife and their grandchildren, which, let's be honest, is probably the best gig of all. We truly, truly are honored to have him here with us today, so please help me welcome Richard Routman and, of course, Rick Mountcastle.
Hey, Susie, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you
I
for
hope I
being
can
here.
live up. I hope I can live up to the standards that you and Don have set for Love Conquers Alls. But I'm glad I'm here because Richard Routman and I have, I would say, come to be friends over the past 2 or 3 years. We've not met in person, but we have talked monthly by telephone, just trying to keep up with what's happening in elder care and batting ideas around about how we can make things better in that world. So I think it's really great to have Richard on. And I guess I can start off the questioning or start off with the ball, Susie, if that's okay with you.
Take it away, Rick.
Yeah, so Richard, you and I have talked about your role on the Commission on Aging, a role you took on after you retired from the Health and Human Services Assistant Regional Counsel. But before we get into the specifics of that, could you describe your general approach that you have taken and are taking in addressing nursing home issues?
Be happy to. Before I comment on that, Rick, I just want to thank Susie for the lovely introduction and congratulate you both for the coming of the new video, which we're all looking forward to in August. It'll be an impactful event for everybody who's interested in improving nursing home care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, the approach to trying to deal with the proper treatment of elders in nursing homes is a complex one. It's both federal and state involved. And one of my post-retirement interests was finding out how the county of Loudoun in Virginia uses federal money as well as some state and local money to promote the interests of residents of nursing homes. So after I spent a year being a volunteer ombudsman in a skilled nursing facility, when my wife and I moved here, I was able to be appointed to the Commission on Aging. And let me give just a minute or two background on what that means. In 1965, Congress passed a statute called the Older Americans Act. And that statute was amended about 10 years later to provide for funding federal monies to go to offices in counties all over the country. Every county in the country has an office called the Area Agency on Aging. And that agency receives some federal money and some state money and is supposed to promote the interests of seniors in that county. It comes with some strings. One of the strings was that the Area Agency on Aging had to establish what is an advisory council. And in Virginia, in Loudoun County, was called the Commission on Aging. And that was a particularly attractive feature to the statute, in my view, because it allowed members of the public, ordinary folks, to be able to have a seat at the table. They weren't empowered to make any decisions, but they were allowed to ask questions. And in Loudoun County, there are 9 members on the Commission on Aging. They're appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and their term is for 4 years. And what are they supposed to do? They're supposed to educate themselves as to what's going on with the elder population and to make suggestions to not only government on the state level, but even the federal level. In other words, they have a portfolio. They don't have any power, but they have the option of educating themselves and trying to persuade people to improve the program. And that has been, since we moved here since I became a member of the Commission on Aging in 2016, and that's a 4-year term, so I was on there until 2020. That was pretty much what I tried to do. And specifically, the Commission on Aging is obligated by statute to review what the area agency is doing to comply with the federal conditions. One of those conditions was established by statute in 2016, and that condition was that the area agencies on aging had to address the issue of the barriers to the investigation of elder abuse. And that included elder abuse in nursing homes. And as it turned out, a few years after that, in 2019, the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services and the Government Accountability Office issued separate reports talking about the problems with the reporting of elder abuse or suspected elder abuse in nursing homes. There's a requirement under state law and under federal law for staff in the nursing homes to report if there is suspected or alleged elder abuse. And it turns out that these reports by the Inspector General and the GAO suggested that it wasn't being done very much. It wasn't being honored as much as it should be. And if there were no sufficient numbers of reports of suspected elder abuse, that creates a huge problem because it needed to be addressed. Attention needed to be paid to it. And that is the problem that we're currently involved in. It is a long-term problem to try to make sure that this very vulnerable population in nursing, particularly in skilled nursing homes, has a voice, and that we help them provide some mechanism to amplify their issues.
What you said barriers. You were saying, I just want to clarify what you meant by barriers, because you said there's, that was the issue is barriers. Is that to who do the barriers apply? And then what are those? Not all of them, but what generally?
That's a great question. In the statute, this is a congressional statute. It uses the word barriers. It says the AAA must address the barriers to the investigation of elder abuse. So what are the barriers? Well, first of all, residents in nursing homes who are abused, and we can define that in a minute or two, have a problem. And the problem is they are fearful, many of them, that if they complain, there'll be retribution. They might be discharged from the facility, or the staff might be angry at them and may take it out on them in different ways. There's another issue. If staff sees an example of a resident being abused, the staff has an obligation to report that. They're mandated reporters under state and federal law. But the staff is also afraid that if they report another staff member, they're going to be subjected to some harassment, or they may even be fired. So that's a barrier that needs to be addressed. Sometimes there's this perception, sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, that the resident has cognitive issues and we can't trust the resident saying what they're saying. So if they say they're being abused, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, we can't be sure. It depends on their level of cognition. But that's a problem of a barrier to the reporting. We don't have to be 100% sure if the resident is saying, the CNA just slapped me or dropped me on the floor. That ought to be the trigger for a report, whether or not there's a cognitive issue or not.
Right. So erring on the safe side, just if there may just be. So if it's brought up, it should be investigated.
Of course. Of course.
Right. Yeah.
The presumption should be that there's a problem here, not that there's not a problem.
Right. Exactly.
There's another situation where the nursing home itself doesn't want these to be reported. Why? Because the Centers for Medicaid and Medicaid Services is going to send in an inspector, a surveyor, and if he finds out or she finds out that this is true, there's a fine that's going to be issued, or maybe something even worse. So there's always the possibility that the nursing home is going to tell staff, if a surveyor comes in because they're interested in knowing what happened, why don't you just tell them you couldn't remember? Or even worse, why don't we remove the records of that resident to another location so it's not easily accessible by the surveyor? Or even worse, why don't we alter the records, the clinical records, the nurse's notes, to make sure that this is a hard trail to follow for the surveyor?
Richard, how often does that happen? Is that something that is regular practice, do you think? Or, I mean, I'm sure you can't say nationally because you're specific to the states that you worked in, but I don't know.
Well, it's a great question. Nobody knows the answer to that question because sometimes the facilities get away with it. But I will tell you that I've personally had a situation where I have had a facility lie to the surveyor. And fortunately, the surveyor was able to determine that that was a lie. And it was a situation where the records were removed so that they couldn't find the records. And this was another situation where this was a chain, and the corporate executives from another city were telling the staff to lie to the surveyor. So it was a big deal.
Yeah.
The problem is...
I just want to say, like, with my mother, on her records, she had Alzheimer's, and one of the issues we were dealing with was that they had her on NPO, which means nothing by mouth. Well, in the records, looking back at it, there were several entries, many entries, where it would say, breakfast, ate part of it, didn't want the rest, as if she was eating regular food, right? And so it was just like, there was no responsible entries. There was many more like that, but it was like, or the patient or the resident is in denial. She has Alzheimer's. What are you talking about, right? So, yeah.
Well,
but most of us don't look at the records. We don't know this.
The nurses' notes are the key to the kingdom, in my opinion. You need to read the nurses' notes, but in any event, those are examples of barriers to finding out what's going on behind the curtain in a nursing home. And just one last item I want to mention. Sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, which is to say that Adult Protective Services, which is an agency of the state, it's in the county, they also investigate abuse in nursing homes, but they don't necessarily tell the state surveying agency what's going on right away. The Attorney General of a state has a unit called the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, and they're also looking at abuse in nursing homes. And sometimes there's a lack of communication, so that they're not coordinated very well, and that can be a problem to determining whether or not there's hell.
Is that by design or just by lack of attention?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, one of the issues that I have always tried to grapple with is the fact that the regulation of nursing home care is fragmented. It's siloed. Some of it's in the state, some of it's in the feds. Sometimes they talk, sometimes they don't. There has to be a higher level of coordination. And whether that was done on purpose is a question that others will have to answer. I can't.
Okay. Thank you. No, that makes that I think that's so important what you're talking about, because most of us as just caregivers or even residents don't really know how all that works. And, we think it's set up to take care of the most vulnerable, and then you come to find out that it, like you said, it's so fragmented and it becomes so complicated that at the end of the day, many family members just give up because it's too complicated and it's too time consuming and it's not fruitful.
It's very frustrating, I'm sure.
So speaking of caregivers and family members, I know some of our listeners at least have loved ones that they're looking out for who are in skilled nursing facilities, and like Susie did, and as depicted in No Country for Old People. What would you recommend to them about becoming involved in a commission or an advisory committee like you were involved in, that advises the local commission on aging?
They can make a phone call to the main desk of the county office and ask for the area agency on aging, and ask for what the timetable is for applying to be a member on the advisory council. It may not be called the Commission on Aging, it might be, but these differ from county to county. Even if they're unable to become members of a advisory council like the Commission on Aging, they can still go to the meetings. These are open to the public. So,
and what would be the benefit? How can they help change things by participating in either the commission itself or those meetings? What's your thoughts and your recommendations on that?
The Commission on Aging should be urged to educate its members by having other representatives from other agencies make presentations. One example would be have somebody from Adult Protective Services talk about how much abuse is being discovered in the nursing homes in that county. Mm-hmm. There are other things that they could do. For example, they could ask for law enforcement to make a presentation as to whether law enforcement in the county has ever been advised within the last year or so whether a complaint has been lodged with respect to alleged or suspected elder abuse in nursing homes. If, in fact, there is a alleged or suspected episode that results particularly in serious bodily injury, the police have to be advised. And if the police have never received any notice, then the question is raised, why not? And that's a proper topic for the Commission on Aging to bring to the attention of elected officials, because it should be on the top of their list to protect vulnerable seniors in nursing homes. So it's a matter of visitors could make recommendations. It's not binding, of course, to say, here are a series of things to do that you could educate yourselves and everybody else. And particularly if the visitor has some issues with a particular nursing home, those issues could be raised and maybe would not be identified by name, but at least the issue could be discussed.
Also, would you say that, I know that personally I didn't know that there was an ombudsman program available to me. I didn't know that. And I would think that it would be important to attend these meetings to find out, ask questions, find out what can ombudsmen do? What's their job description really? And what does Adult Protective Services do? Do they talk to each other? How does that work? And then when you say police enforcement getting involved, when do they come in? Is it a chain of events? How does that work?
Those are great questions. Let me take them one at a time.
Okay.
There are two types of ombudsman. Every state has a long-term care ombudsman office, and they have paid staff. But there's not enough staff to go around to all of the nursing homes in the state. So they have to get volunteer ombudsmen, which are folks like what I did. You take training, and you are required to go into a nursing home for not less than 4 hours every week. And even then, not every nursing home has even a volunteer ombudsman. But what does the ombudsman do? The ombudsman has contact with all the residents, and they'll say, tell me if there are any issues, and I'm telling you that I won't tell anybody unless you give me permission. This will be confidential, so you can be free to talk to me about it. Now, that's a good way to elicit information, but it is also somewhat frustrating because the resident who may unload a burden on the ombudsman may say, you can't tell anybody because I'm afraid of retribution or retaliation or being discharged. So it puts the ombudsman in a difficult spot. Well, maybe there's a remedy for that. Maybe the Commission on Aging could think of a way to get around that problem and make a suggestion to elected officials.
I have a question. Wait, I just want to say to that. Couldn't it be like the way that you deal with a whistleblower, somebody where you can present what's going on without presenting the source?
That would be a perfect thing to suggest, and that would require some specific training of the ombudsman. I've gone through that training, and that part is not there. There isn't a nuance because you're always wanting to protect your source. That your source is the resident. You don't want to put the resident in a position of harm.
Sure.
So that's the ombudsman. As far as the Adult Protective Service, that was your next point. Adult Protective Service, or APS, is interested in one major goal, and that is the safety of the resident. So if there's an allegation of abuse, APS will be contacted, hopefully, by the facility. Or if the resident is transferred to the emergency room at the hospital, the admitting doctor should notify APS if there's some reason to believe that there's been abuse, physical abuse, or even sexual or physical, or perhaps even emotional. APS will send out an investigator, and if it happens that the alleged perpetrator has been fired, that is, the staff person who is alleged to have committed the abuse, even if we don't know that for sure, has been fired or has voluntarily quit or has been moved to another floor and is no longer in proximity to this resident, APS's investigation is closed because their mission has been accomplished. They have provided some assurance that the resident is now safe, and they are not in the business of determining whether anything wrong was done.
Gotcha.
And that's a problem, because I have talked to APS people and I've said, look, if you go in there and you find out that there was abuse, but the resident is now dead, partly
Right.
because of that abuse, you close your investigation. My question is, what happens if you find out if another staff member knew of the abuse and failed to report it? Is it part of your duty to deal with that issue, to report that person for failing? They're all mandated reporters. What about that guy? He failed to report it. My impression of APS is that's not part of their deal. All they do is find out if the resident is safe or dead or gone, or the perpetrator's gone.
Right. If the problem is gone, the problem is no longer.
Well, the problem still exists because the perpetrator is now at another facility.
Exactly, or on a different floor, which is ridiculous.
Or on a different floor, right.
So what's a family member or caregiver to do in those circumstances? Is there any recourse where they basically want to see justice happen? That's not justice, right? It's not justice that an individual has abused a person, and because that person is passed or the perpetrator has been transferred to another floor, case closed. That doesn't remedy the abuse.
That's
so
right.
Is there any recourse for a caregiver or a family member?
Of course, as you well know, there's the legal system, and that raises the issue of what happened when the resident was admitted. Did the admission papers require you to sign what's called a pre-dispute arbitration agreement, which is provision in the admission agreement that says, in the event that you have a claim or the resident has a claim against the nursing home, you agree now to waive a jury and to waive all litigation and to participate in an arbitration with an arbitration program that the facility will set up or has set up. Most people who are confronted with that have to sign it because they don't have much of a choice, but they don't have a lot of confidence that will have the same impact as a jury trial if they can ever get a lawyer to take that case to a trial. I suppose an additional feature to the answer to you, Rick, is that the family or the resident could call the state survey agency and say, look, do something about the fact that there was no reporting of abuse here. In Virginia, there's a commissioner of aging. He is the head, or she is the head of the Department of Aging and Rehabilitation Services. And the commissioner has the power to have a hearing against any staff member who fails to comply with mandated reporting laws. And if the staff member is found guilty, the fee is $100. If he's found guilty the second time, and the fee is anywhere between $100 and $1,000. Pretty small change considering the situation.
But so that's all kind of peripheral. But this would be the time, wouldn't it? I just make a suggestion to call the local police department or the sheriff's office to report that, because elder abuse is a crime.
Yes.
And notwithstanding the fact that APS has closed its case because the person is no longer in danger either by death, transfer of the perpetrator, or otherwise, would that be, I just might want to suggest that might be the time to call the local police or the sheriff's office or the Medicaid fraud control unit of the state, the local office of that, right?
You're absolutely correct. I should have added that, so thank you for adding for me. The federal regulation, by the way, does say that if there is abuse or suspected or alleged abuse that results or appears to result in serious physical harm, you have 2 hours to report it to law enforcement. If there's abuse that does not result in serious physical harm, you have 24 hours to report it. So there's a specific provision, relatively new, that points in the direction of law enforcement. I might add that in the past, during my 4-year term, I asked local law enforcement, had they ever been notified of any possible abuse allegations? And the answer was no.
But that's something that a family member or caregiver could do.
No question.
In the absence of any kind of reporting by a government official or anybody at the facility, that's an option that's available to it.
No question. You're absolutely right.
But
Jerry. Thank you for adding that point.
I want to clarify what you said, though, about the 2-hour window. Because what if you, as a family member, like you have somebody who is nonverbal, your loved one is nonverbal, and you find out that they've been sexually abused, right? And they move the perpetrator to, say, another floor. But you don't find out about that for whatever, a couple weeks. It just happens to leak out and you get it. Now, your window's passed to file a report with the police department, or what?
Oh, no, you can always file the report. The facility has the obligation within 2 hours.
See.
It's not you.
See. Okay.
The facility has the obligation. Okay. You can do it at any time.
Okay.
And now, and you talked about the difficulties of the civil process, for example, filing a civil lawsuit against the facility. You mentioned that the issue being if you've signed some sort of an arbitration agreement, which I think are being frowned upon by at least by some of the government authorities. But in the event that you didn't, it's often difficult, right, to even get a private attorney to take your case. Do you have any thoughts on why that is?
Well, I do have some thoughts. First of all, the private plaintiffs bar, they all know each other. Even nationally, they know each other because there's so few of them, and they specialize in nursing home cases. So it's well worth trying to find someone. But one of the problems is that sometimes state law has caps on the amount of damages you can get in a civil suit. I don't happen to remember what they are in Virginia. I'm not licensed in Virginia, but so that creates a disincentive financially for some attorneys. And of course, historically, the notion was, well, it's an 85-year-old woman. She's got no earning power. There are no damages. That turned out to be a complete bogus reason, because when cases are brought and they're compelling, the jury verdicts often are very good. It's just hard to get lawyers to do it, and it takes time.
Well, and I think the reason for those compelling jury verdicts is that the damages component for a nursing home resident is pain and suffering. Yes? Would you agree with that?
I would.
It's not lost wages. It's not medical payments, because it's usually covered by Medicaid or Medicare or some insurance. But it's pain and suffering. And the way kind of, going to a conversation that Susie and I had long ago at the beginning of our journey was, hey, Susie, you're a filmmaker, videotape what's happening to your mom to show the pain and suffering. Now, Susie happens to be a filmmaker, but I think that the iPhone has actually made all of us filmmakers. So maybe would you Oh, what would be your thought on advising family members who find themselves in a situation where they're fighting abuse and neglect in a nursing home, using their phones to videotape what's going on?
Well, that's a great idea. Of course, it requires them to be there. Another option is to have a surreptitious recording device, a video recording device in the room. Now, there have been examples where the facility may require you to tell them that you're doing it. But there have been cases where they've done it without the facility knowing.
Can I put a caution on that? Because every state has different laws with regard to surreptitiously videotaping someone.
Right.
So you must consult with your state law on whether it's legal for you to do that. So I just put that as a caution. Some states it is legal. I think one state, and I can't remember which one, says you can do it as long as there's not sound. And then some states say it's illegal to videotape someone without their permission. So I would put a caution on that. I would suggest to our listeners, don't just do that until you find out what your state law requires.
I totally agree.
I just want to throw something in with my own, experience as well. It's like when Rick had said, start, taking video of your mom so you have a record of what's going on. And the frontline providers, a lot of the CNAs who were, didn't want to jeopardize their jobs. Clearly, they got to the point where they were like, you can't record, you can't take a picture, you have to go out. It's against our rules. Well, I just assumed that was right because they were throwing out HIPAA and all that and saying you can't, you have to get permission. Well, that's not true. You have to find out what your rights are per your state and find out if you are allowed. I don't know if you know, but I don't know if that is even a law anywhere that you can't take video of your own family member.
I don't know the answer. I was aware of at least one case years ago where the facility did not know about the camera. The film was introduced and it was fine, but that was a long time ago. One of the advantages of having Rick here is that he's keeping me on the straight and narrow with respect to the law.
The law is different in different states,
absolutely.
So you have to be careful. That's all, right?
No, I totally.
But as far as HIPAA, though, that's a federal law. And so, Susie, in a case of a caregiver who has power of attorney to make medical decisions for their loved one, they are actually as though they're that person. So you can film your loved one if you are the power of attorney.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Some places they call it something else.
Conservator of person was what it was called.
Right, or power of attorney. You don't need to get anybody's permission because you stand in the shoes of that person that you want to film.
Right.
If you're not one of those in those power of attorney, just get your loved one. Just get your grandma or mom or dad or whoever it is to say, hey, I agree to let you film me.
Yeah.
You have that piece of paper, and it doesn't have to be anything formal. Just their acknowledgement or their permission and their signature. And now you can film away, and it doesn't matter what the facility says.
Right. It's important, I think, for people to know that, yeah, because I was afraid, so I didn't want to get retaliation and rock the boat anymore. So I was trying to be, not rock the apple cart too much. So.
Right.
But I should have done more.
I totally agree with Rick. One other cautionary note is you have to be careful not to film if there's a roommate, you have to make sure that roommate is not filmed.
Yes.
Because you don't have permission there.
Correct. Yes.
But, Rick, just to further your point, this is such an important device for knowing about what's going on at night in a nursing home or on the weekend in a nursing home when it's not well staffed. That would be a proper subject for an advisory council like the Commission on Aging to promote this issue and give it visibility, because there are examples of where it has worked dramatically in litigation. And it might be a long process to get that kind of acceptance for the law to permit it, but it would be worth at least beginning that process, I think.
Richard, do you have any thoughts on why these commissions on aging, which are in every county, right, and they're advised by citizens of that county, why things are not improving in the nursing homes? In fact, they're getting worse. I mean, we have these groups that are there to provide some sort of support for the elderly. They're government groups in every county, but things just seem to be getting worse. Any speculation or thoughts on that?
Well, my feeling is that the program for advisory councils should include a training so that people understand. We're talking about folks who have some interest but don't have much background, and it's a complicated area. There's a lot of federal, state mishmash. So they should be trained to ask the right questions and to demand to talk to agencies at meetings and get answers. So I think that it's a long process to get people to educate themselves and to have the guts to go to elected officials and say, look, we've got to make some changes here. I wish I had a better answer than that, Rick, but I'm afraid this is an intractable issue.
No, that makes perfect sense. So would you recommend that, people like our listeners on this program, or people who are caregivers for elderly folks that are in skilled nursing facilities, would you recommend that they get involved in these advisory committees that advise commissions on aging?
I absolutely would recommend it, and I also have another recommendation, that Susie Singer-Carter and Rick Moncastle come up with a training program in addition to their film that can be used by every county commission in the country. And actually, I'm pretty serious about that.
Well, we're hoping that the film will help that and people will be able to use parts of the film as training and use it as education, and also this podcast where, we're specifically talking about these subjects in detail, because that's what's important, because knowledge is power. And we're with you. That's one of our goals, right, Rick? To educate.
There's also,
absolutely,
if I may add another point, there is a political feature to this issue. If it is true, which I believe it is, that nursing home chains and nursing homes make political contributions to legislators, they have a great deal of influence on the kind of oversight that actually occurs on nursing homes. Why not require nursing home chains to disclose the amount and recipients of their political contributions? I think that would be an important thing for the people to know, because there have been plenty of people who've tried to make changes in the system, and it's very hard to do.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond that. It's the contributions to our political candidates and things like that, right? So I've seen so many groups now in the past 3 years that I've watched them work so hard on getting bills, recognized and then into the system, and then they're killed.
But,
they're dead on arrival, yeah.
The American Healthcare Association is the lobbying arm for the nursing home industry. What are their political contributions? I suspect they're substantial.
Well, if you go to, you can find a lot of the federal information on opensecrets.org. And if you go to opensecrets.org, you'll see that they spend hundreds of millions of dollars annually on campaign contributions and lobbying. And, I think there was a report that was generated specifically about the nursing home industry's contributions and involvement in political lobbying that they issued a few years ago that you can find on that website. So it's opensecrets.org. It shows that, in fact, it is true, Richard, that the American Healthcare Association and its state affiliates contribute hundreds of millions of dollars a year to campaign contributions and lobbying.
Well, if that is true, and I have no doubt that Rick is correct, people like the rest of the ordinary folks in commissions on aging are fighting with sticks, and the other side are fighting with guns.
100%, Richard. That's why
Exactly.
we need to have a movement. That's why you're validating everything that we've been trying to communicate. Yeah.
And by the way, just so people know, most of that money that they're using for those political contributions and lobbying is our tax money, because Medicare and Medicaid substantially make up the most of the revenue. 80 to 90% of the nursing homes revenue comes from Medicare and Medicaid, our tax monies, which they turn around and put into political contributions and lobbying to make sure that we keep getting the crappy care in nursing homes that we've been getting for 50 years. So that's my soapbox. I'm off of it now.
I'm gonna wait. Let me jump on that soapbox. Just one thing to add is that not only are they spending our money, they are also buying themselves seats at the table in our legislation. So they also sit there as advisors and advise when to pass on something, even if it gets to that far. So there's that too.
I think so. I'll give you an example. I'm not sure that this is fair, but I'm going to say it anyway. Under state law in Virginia, there's a requirement, as in all states, for mandated reporting. But there's a provision in the law which is unusual. Maybe Rick knows about it. And it says, essentially, that if a staff person at a nursing home acquires information involving abuse, that person can simply tell the person in charge of the institution, that would be the administrator of the nursing home, who then has the responsibility to report it. The first person doesn't have to report it. He just has to tell his boss or her boss. And then the boss then makes a separate determination whether there is sufficient suspicion to report it. When I was at the commission, I called up state officials and said, "Is this a problem? Are you having an issue here with this problem?" And they said yes. And it's never been changed, and it's been a subject of frustration for me.
See, that's such it's so obvious and so egregious at the same time, right? Because I went and reported everything that I thought was wrong with my mom, just from what the CNAs were telling me, and I would go to the administrator, the director, and they would say, "Nope, we're fine. We're not understaffed. Nope, no, we got plenty of help. Nope, don't worry about it. It's all good." Nothing was reported, and they weren't going to report it. Why would they?
Well, they should, because it's the law.
They should, but they don't. They don't, right?
Well, somebody's got to pay attention to this with greater intensity than they have been.
Yes. Rick, that's why we're doing No Country for Old People.
Yes, the public needs to be educated about all of this, all of the failings of the system, so that the public can know and become activated to demand change, because that's the only way we're going to overcome the hundreds of millions of dollars in money that the industry puts into keeping things the same.
I think that's true, and we may be on the brink of a time where there are fewer government employees, and it's going to put a greater burden on ordinary citizens to step up to the plate and take action and be proactive about doing something, even if it's only providing a voice, that's at least something. And hopefully, in the course of time, elected officials will pay attention.
You know, it's really telling that we, having both of you who have had so many years experience in this field of trying to bring quality care and, less than substandard care to our most vulnerable. And you've spent so many decades trying to do it. And your conclusion is that it's on us as a collective, because if we don't listen to that, people, as a community, then we are failing as human beings. I mean, this is a human rights situation, and we need to step up. We have to, because that's the only power we have right now. It's obvious both of you have spent your lives working within that system, and this is the conclusion. So it really speaks volumes to what we're trying to say through the documentary as well.
If people weren't as concerned about seniors and the possibility that seniors suffer from abuse as they are about babies who might also suffer from abuse, we wouldn't have this conversation. But there's
I just had a conversation with another colleague of mine who's in the health system, and she said, well, babies are cute. Well, cute is in the eye of the beholder. Some babies aren't that cute. I'm just saying. Listen, my mom was adorable, and in my mind, she was the best. So, we have to get up, and that's true. Babies we treat babies different.
But just from if you're a human being, you don't want to see someone suffering. I don't care who they are, how old they are, someone suffering from a stage 4 pressure ulcer, suffering from sepsis, suffering from dehydration. Just as human beings, it shouldn't matter how cute they are or how comparatively cute they are. It should matter that you see suffering and you want to change that. You want to make it better. You want to make it go away. That should be enough. 100%.
But why? But you're right, Richard. It's like, why we've had that conversation. One of our interviewees who used to work for Adult Protective Services and was very active in the caregiving community and elder care rights, and she would say to her colleagues, I need somebody over here, there's some abuse going on. Okay, we'll make a report and we'll check it out tomorrow. No, someone needs to come now. But it doesn't happen like that. But in children, for the Children's Protective Services, it does. It happens right there. So it's built into our system to have this ageism, to have this ableism. It's built into it.
I think it's a cultural thing. I don't think that's as true necessarily in other countries. For example, I think
it's becoming worse and worse, though. Honestly, it's becoming a worldwide phenomenon of this individualistic kind of society that we have created. And
I think that's right. But historically, correct me if I'm wrong, Japan didn't have nursing homes. And if you grow old in Japan, or this is years ago, you were with the family. Only in recent years have there been nursing homes in Japan.
And now it's actually worse. They're having a crisis now where they are basically sending the elders out to these communities of homes where they're just left on their own to take care of themselves, and with no oversight. And it's because the population and because of the way that society now is looking at the elder generation, it's so easy to look at them through, a lens as if they're othered, as one of our experts said. They're othered,
right.
And we will be that other in a blink of an eye. We are all there.
Well, with the demographics of our population, this is going to just get worse and worse in this country, because the seniors are probably the predominant feature of the population, or they will be fairly soon.
They are. They call it a gray tsunami. That's the term.
Right.
And there's so much value in that population no matter what. And that's the problem. We need to really shift that perspective to a more healthier perspective, because we're losing out on some incredible, value that comes from our elder generations. And I only get smarter, I hope, and I only get more valuable as a person, I hope, as I grow. So I see that in the people above me, ahead of me. I look to my elders as mentors and guides. That they should be revered. That's the way I look at it.
Well, let's hope that No Country for Old People is required viewing by everybody at schools and medical schools and nursing schools.
From your mouth to God's ears. Thank you. Well, thank you today for coming. Is there anything else you wanted to say that was burning and that I missed or Rick missed and that you wanted to share with us?
It's hard to think of anything that either of you missed. So I'm appreciative of your filling the gaps when I forgot a few things. But anyway, I appreciate
it's lovely.
I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you. It's very important. Again, congratulations on your work. We're going to look forward to August and all of the publicity that comes with your film.
Oh, well, thank you. We loved having you. And as you might know, this show is all about love. It's in the title. And the reason is because love is powerful. Love is contagious, and love conquers alls. And that's what I feel, and I'm not changing my mind. So I think love is the greatest tool in our arsenal. So thank you, Richard. You're full of love, and we really appreciated having you today. Rick, you know how I feel about you. So anyway, if you like this show, please earmark it and share it with everybody and talk about it. Give us good reviews. Come back and listen again, and keep an eye out for No Country for Old People, and have a wonderful time until we're together again. Take care.
Thanks to you both. Bye-bye.
Thank you.